Once in the heart of Africa there was a kingdom that dared to stand against Egypt. It had gold, it had pyramids, it had its own writing. At night, iron furnaces burned across the desert, and an orange light spread over the sand. And this kingdom had a one-eyed queen who never bowed to the Roman Empire. Yet today, most people do not even know her name. Tonight, I am taking you to that kingdom history forgot. Further south of the Nile, into the desert, among the sand, the stone, the fire and the stars. The name of this kingdom was Kush, and one of its brightest hearts was Meroë. But before we reach Meroë, close your eyes and imagine the Nile. Night has slowly come down. The surface of the river stretches out like dark blue cloth. Moonlight trembles on the water. In the distance there are reeds. A soft wind passes through them. Sometimes the wing of a bird touches the water. Sometimes the shadow of an animal appears on the bank and fades away. The river does what it has done for thousands of years. It flows toward the north, silent, patient, and ancient. If this journey is doing you good, do not forget to subscribe to the channel. Because here, every night before sleep, we slowly open a forgotten door of history. Sometimes we travel to a kingdom lost in the middle of the desert. Sometimes to a ship resting at the bottom of the sea. Sometimes to an old story whose name no one remembers anymore. Now let us return to the quiet flow of the Nile. On the banks of this river, kingdoms were born, cities rose, temples were built, people prayed, fought, loved, lost, and began again. The great pharaohs of Egypt looked upon this river. So did the kings of Kush. Because the Nile was not only a waterway, it was life itself. Imagine yourself moving slowly south through the night. You leave the known cities of Egypt behind. The columns of the temples, the giant statues, the names of the pharaohs slowly drift away. The road carries you toward warmer, quieter, less known lands. The desert widens, the sky grows larger, the stars begin to look brighter. And after a while you arrive in the land of Kush, a place that appears in most history books like a small footnote, yet was truly a vast world of its own. This was not merely a place left in the shadow of Egypt. This was a civilization that created its own kings, its own gods, its own cities, its own pride. And Meroë was one of the beating hearts of this civilization in the middle of the desert. Meroë was like a miracle in the heart of the desert. It stood by the river, yes, but it did not live by leaning on the river alone. It was also in one of the rare places the rain could reach. At certain times of the year the sky would darken, dark clouds would come from far away, and rain would fall upon the desert soil. In such a land, rain was not an ordinary event of nature. It was life itself. When the first drops touched the ground, the scent of the dry sand rose into the air. People would look up at the sky. Children would run outside. Animals would lift their heads. Because everyone knew that this water did not only wet the soil, it saved the coming months, the food, the herds, and life itself. After the rain, the land around Meroë would change. The dry earth would soften, grasses would turn green, and the herds would feed again. Cattle, goats, and sheep wandered across these green spaces. Fields were sown, and people gathered with care everything the soil gave them. In the middle of the desert, a small green island, almost hidden, would appear. But the people of Meroë were not a people who only waited for the rain. They had learned to catch the water. They dug great reservoirs. When the rain fell, the water gathered in these basins. When the dry months came, that water kept life going. We are speaking of a clever people who knew how to store water in the heart of the desert, how to divide it, and how to use it. A people who knew the value of every drop, who answered the harshness of nature not with haste, but with patience. Perhaps this was the true strength of Meroë, not only its wealth, not only its armies. The fact that it had learned to live in a difficult place, that it tried to understand the language of the desert rather than fight it. And there was something else very important that grew the wealth of this city. Iron. That hard metal that changed the fate of wars in the ancient ages. That sharp substance with which the Assyrians made their terrible weapons, the material that gave strength to armies. Meroë began to produce iron in its own land. Beneath the soil there was iron ore. All around there were trees to feed the furnaces. In time the area around Meroë filled with iron furnaces. Now imagine a night. Darkness has fallen over Meroë. You are standing at the edge of the city. The sky is black, the stars are bright, but the horizon is not completely dark, because far away the furnaces are burning. Orange lights blend into the night. Fires are lined up one after another. It is as if small suns are glowing in the heart of the desert. Workers stand at the furnaces. Their faces are lit by the light of the fire. The bellows are working. Hot air ripples above the embers. The iron turns red, softens, and becomes ready to take shape. Then it is left in the hands of the masters. The sound of hammers spreads through the night. A heavy, rhythmic, and patient sound. The iron is beaten. It is shaped. A piece of metal becomes a tool by the human hand. Plough blades are made. Knives, spear tips, everyday objects and ornaments appear. Imagine the hands of a blacksmith. Hardened hands carrying the marks of burns. A face that has spent years before the fire. His eyes know the colour of the embers. He knows when the iron is ready, when it has grown too hot, when it might break. This knowledge was not something learned only from books. It was like a secret passed from father to son, from master to apprentice. With every strike, not only a tool, but the future of a kingdom was being shaped. Because iron was needed to plough the soil as well, and to fight, and to build houses, to cut wood, to make doors, to protect animals, to trade. The iron of Meroë entered not only the battlefields, but also the smallest corners of daily life. A farmer carried an iron tool as he walked to his field in the morning. A soldier trusted in an iron spear tip while keeping watch at the border. A craftsman used the same hard metal to work a small ornament. So much iron was worked that some call Meroë the iron city of the ancient world. The ashes of those furnaces that burned for centuries still stand today as hills. Black and silent mounds piled around the city, like the memory of fires that once burned here without rest. When day came, Meroë turned into an entirely different place. Imagine the marketplace, colours, sounds, smells, traders coming from the north, caravans coming from the south, people arriving from the east, from the west, from distant roads. One is selling ivory, one is weighing gold on a small scale, one is stringing glass beads. Another opens bags of spices, and the sharp scent mixes into the hot air. Camels, donkeys, herds, human voices, animal voices, the distant strikes of the blacksmiths. All of it blends together. In the marketplace, everything has a story. The ivory has come from distant forests. The gold has been drawn from riverbeds and from the rich lands of the south. The beads have perhaps passed by the shores of other seas. A cloth has been opened here after a long journey. A child holds his mother's hand and passes through the crowd. A trader uses his hands to explain the value of his goods. An old man sits in the shade and watches the people go by. Meroë was not a silent city in the middle of the desert. It was the centre of a living, crowded, rich and self-assured world. This kingdom had yet another strength: elephants. The armies of Meroë trained war elephants. At the edge of the desert, imagine the great grey animals. They move with heavy steps. They have wide ears, powerful bodies, feet that crush the ground. Each one is trained with patience. It is made used to the human voice, the sound of drums, the crowd, and the noise of war. This training was not done in haste. To earn the trust of an elephant took time. To approach it without fear, to give it water, to make it know your voice, to control its walk, and to prepare it for the chaos of battle took great patience. In war they walked in front. The ground trembled beneath their feet. An army of elephants spread fear into the enemy before the battle had even begun. Meroë was a kingdom that knew how to capture the wild elephant, how to calm it, and how to prepare it for war. There were even special structures built for these animals. Wide and solid spaces of stone. Places in the heart of the desert where power and patience stood side by side. But now, let us move away from the noise of war. Let us look at the most beautiful and most silent view of Meroë. The pyramids. In Meroë pyramids rose, but these were not like the pyramids of Egypt. They were smaller, they were narrower, and far steeper. They were like sharp needles of stone, reaching from the desert toward the sky. Imagine the sunset. On the sand, dozens of pyramids stand side by side. Their pointed tops shine in the last light. Their long and thin shadows fall across the desert. The wind blows softly. The sand moves slowly at the base of the stones. Everything is silent, warm and ancient. Imagine walking among these pyramids. Fine sand lies beneath your feet. With each step, a very faint sound rises. There is no one around. Only the wind passes between the stones. You stand before a pyramid. Its surface has worn away with time, but it is still standing. It still rises toward the sky. Like the last wish of a forgotten king. Like the silent voice of queens and kings saying, "We were here." Before each pyramid there was a small room, a chapel. There, for the dead king or queen, food, drink, and gifts were left. Pictures were carved into the walls. The journey of the king, the welcome of the gods, the passage to the other world. And deep within the pyramid there was a hidden chamber, the final resting place. When a king died, they would bring him here, in a long and slow procession. At the front the priests walked. Incense burned, its smoke mixing into the warm air. The voices of the mourners spread across the desert, then were lost in the wind. The body of the king was carried wrapped in the finest cloths. Then came the things he had valued in life: golden vessels, weapons, jewels, food, drink. Perhaps his favourite scents, perhaps a small object he used in daily life. Because for them death was not an end. Death was another journey, and the king had to go to that journey prepared. The procession would reach the pyramid. The body would be lowered gently into the hidden chamber deep below. Prayers were read. Final glances were given. Then the door would close. Stone was set upon stone, and the silence inside would remain unbroken for centuries. You may be surprised to hear a fact. In these lands there are far more pyramids than in Egypt. Hundreds of pyramids. Stone tombs, scattered across the desert, rising in groups. Beneath each one a king, a queen, a name, a story. Yet the world forgot them for a long time, because they were in the south, beyond the known roads, because they belonged to Kush, and Kush was the kingdom history forgot. In Meroë people also began to worship their own gods. Amun still existed. Because in the long shared past of Egypt and Kush the name of Amun was very great. In the temples prayers were offered to him, kings ascended the throne in his name, and his power was spoken of in the shadow of the sacred mountains. But in time, Meroë did not only follow the path of the old traditions. It began to show its own spirit, its own land, and its own voice more openly. Beside Amun, gods born from within these lands were added. One of them was very powerful, Apedemac, the lion god. You see him on the temple walls, sometimes as a man with the head of a lion, sometimes as a frightening and warlike being with 3 heads and many arms. He was a god who carried the power of the desert. He was like the god of the hot winds, the distant steppes, the warrior kings, and the temples that gaze at the sky. In Egypt there was no exact likeness of him. Apedemac was the very voice of the south. They built him a temple, the Lion Temple. On its walls, kings and gods stood side by side. Before it stood rows of ram statues. In the heart of the desert, a silent and majestic sacred place dedicated to the lion god. Now, imagine approaching that temple at sunrise. The air is still cool. The sand has cooled through the night. The sun slowly rises from the horizon and lays its first light upon the stones. The reliefs on the walls seem suddenly to come alive. The lion-headed god emerges from the shadows. The king or the queen stands upright before him. In one hand there is power, in the other a prayer. Silence reigns before the temple. Perhaps once priests walked here. The smoke of incense rose between the columns. People left offerings. They prayed for victory, for rain, for children to be born, for long life. Today it still stands there, in the sand, silent, but still powerful. One of the most mysterious legacies of Meroë was its writing. For a long time they used the hieroglyphs of Egypt. But one day they developed their own signs, their own alphabet, the Meroitic script. They carved it into walls, monuments, and tablets. They left upon the stone the names of kings, prayers, ceremonies, and perhaps the small traces of daily life. And here there is a strange and somewhat sorrowful truth. We still cannot fully read that writing today. We recognize the signs, we know their sounds, we can even read some of them aloud. But the meaning of most words is still in darkness. Those words stand upon the stones, yet they do not fully tell us what they say. Think of it, the voice of an entire people carved into walls. It stands right before us, but we cannot yet truly hear it. Perhaps the victory of a king is told there. Perhaps the name of a mother is there. Perhaps a temple ceremony. Perhaps a small trace left by an ordinary person thousands of years ago. Perhaps a prayer. Perhaps only a sentence saying, "I was here." But we still do not fully know. Perhaps one day we will understand. Perhaps those stones will one day speak. Perhaps one word will open the door to another text. And in a moment, the voice of Meroë that we thought had gone silent will be heard again. But for now, the Meroitic script is one of the deepest secrets the desert keeps. Now your eyes may have grown a little heavy. Your breath may have slowed. Your body may have sunk a little deeper into the bed. Let it stay that way. You do not need to follow all of this story. If you wish, you can fall asleep right here. If some sentences are slipping away from your mind, let them go. If you do not remember some of the names, it does not matter. Tonight the aim is not to learn all of it. Tonight the aim is to slow down, to blend into the silence of a distant desert, to feel the faint light of the fires, the shadows of the pyramids, the patience of the old stones. If this quiet journey is doing you good, you can subscribe to the channel. Because here, every night before sleep, a forgotten door of history slowly opens. But if you are still awake, let me tell you of the most striking rulers of Meroë. Because in this kingdom there was something very rarely seen. Powerful queens, they were called the Kandake. This was not only a beautiful title, it was real power. These women could sit upon the throne alone. They could command armies. They ruled the kingdom, took part in ceremonies in the name of the gods, and were carved into walls as sovereigns. In an age when in many parts of the world women remained in the shadows. In Meroë, the queens stood right in the middle of the light. You see them on the temple walls, powerful, magnificent, and sure of themselves, as they defeat their enemies, as they stand before the gods, as great as a king, as mighty as a king. These depictions do not only tell us of a woman's beauty or her place in the palace, they tell of power. They tell of a woman standing at the centre of the state, women who appeared before their people, who made offerings, who defied the enemy, who had their own names carved into stone. The name of these queens reached far beyond the desert. Centuries later, even in the sacred texts written in distant lands, these southern queens were spoken of. The name Kandake travelled like a legend. People far away had heard that in the south there were powerful women ruling a vast kingdom, and this had filled them with wonder. One of these queens was Amanirenas. She was very wealthy. She was buried in her tomb with the most beautiful golden jewellery. Bracelets, rings, necklaces, jewels made with fine craftsmanship, pieces adorned with figures of the lion god. Centuries later that jewellery was found. When people looked upon it, they saw how powerful and rich a queen of Meroë had been. That gold stands today in museums, like the gleam of a queen who came out of the heart of the desert. But do not think of that jewellery only as wealth. Every bracelet carries the light of a palace, every ring the silence of a ceremony, every necklace the trace of a power once carried upon a queen's neck. Perhaps that gold once shone beneath the sun. Perhaps it was seen in ceremonies, in the light of the temple, among the prayers of the priests. Then it was lowered into a dark tomb. It remained there for centuries, and one day it came out into the daylight again, as if the queen, after a long sleep, was saying, "I was not forgotten." But among them there was one whose name turned into a true legend, Amanirenas. In her time a new giant had come from the north, one of the greatest powers the world had ever seen until then. Rome. Rome had already swallowed Egypt. The land of the pharaohs was now a province of Rome. Egypt, which once had its own gods, its own kings, and its own idea of eternity, was now under the rule of Rome. And now Rome had set its eyes further south, upon Kush, upon the land of gold. But Amanirenas was not afraid. She was a Kandake. According to what is told, she had lost one of her eyes in war. Yet this did not stop her. On the contrary, it gave her a harder and more unforgettable appearance. The one-eyed queen stood before her army. She was old, she was wounded, but she was undaunted. Bring her before your eyes. The desert wind strikes her face. Behind her are her soldiers. Before her is the road to the north. On one side priests, on the other commanders. Everyone awaits her decision. While the very name of Rome was enough to frighten many kingdoms, she did not choose to retreat. She gathered her army and marched north. She attacked the border cities of Rome. She took them by surprise. Rome did not expect such an answer from the south. It had not thought this desert kingdom would be so bold. The army of Amanirenas seized something very special in one city. A statue of the Emperor Augustus, a head made of bronze, the face of the most powerful man of Rome. The face of the emperor, whose name the whole world knew in that age, whom kings and cities feared. Amanirenas had the head of that statue taken, and she carried it south into her own lands. Then she gave a very sharp message. She had that bronze head buried beneath the threshold of a temple, right at the entrance, in such a place that everyone who entered would, every day, step over the face of the Roman emperor. Think of it, the face of Augustus beneath the soil, people walking over it, priests walking over it, the people walking over it. Every step like a silent victory against Rome. There was no need for words. The message lay beneath the stone. This was not only the head of a statue, this was an answer given to an empire. You may rule everywhere in the world, but this is our land. Here your face stands not in the sky, but beneath our feet. Such a message was stronger than long speeches. Years passed, centuries passed, the temple fell. The city grew quiet, the sand covered everything. That bronze head remained beneath the soil. It was forgotten. Then, a very long time later, people dug that earth, and they found it. The head of Augustus, right in the place where the queen had buried it. It was covered with sand, but it was still there. Its eyes were still gazing, like a piece of bronze that had carried the pride of a queen for 2,000 years. That head stands today in a museum. Many people who look upon it perhaps do not know its story. They do not know that this face once lay beneath the threshold of a temple, by the command of a warrior queen, with the pride of a desert kingdom. Rome and Kush fought for a long time. Both sides grew weary. As the war dragged on, neither could Rome advance easily, nor could Kush fully retreat. The desert was not an easy enemy for Rome. The distance, the heat, the harshness of the roads, the bends of the river, the knowledge of the local people, and the determination of Meroë slowed the power of Rome. For an empire, a place that looks small on a map can be a wall hard to cross in the real world. In the end, envoys came and went. Talks were held. A peace treaty emerged. And here is the most surprising part. Rome was forced to show respect to this southern kingdom. It took no tribute from Kush. A border was drawn, and Kush remained independent. Think of it. One of the greatest empires of that age, mighty Rome, was forced to make an agreement with this desert kingdom. This was no small success. This was a great moment of pride for Meroë. And at the centre of this victory stood a one-eyed, old, wounded, yet fearless queen. Now deepen your breath a little more. The story is slowing down, just like the night descending upon the desert. Soft, silent, endless. Meroë lived for centuries, with its iron, with its gold, with its queens, with its pyramids, with its lion god, with its own writing. In the heart of the desert alone it existed as a proud and wealthy kingdom. In the mornings the markets opened, in the evenings the furnaces burned, in the temples prayers rose, children were born, the old told stories. Kings were crowned. Queens had their names carved into stone. Someone walked along the bank of the Nile. Someone waited for the distant caravans. Someone mourned a loved one in the shadow of the pyramids. History often tells of kings, wars, and treaties, but a civilization is not made of these alone. Meroë was also the city of the women who baked the morning bread, of the children who were blacksmith apprentices, of the traders who bargained in the market, of the people who worked at the water basins, of the priests who prayed in the shadow of the temple, and of the weary bodies that returned home when evening came. Imagine looking upon Meroë at one sunset. The sky is red. Smoke rises from the furnaces. In the distance the pointed tips of the pyramids appear. The market slowly empties. The animals return to their pens. The sound of the river comes from far away. A mother calls her child. A soldier goes to his post. A priest closes the door of the temple. And the city slowly withdraws into the night. But like all things, it too one day began to slow. There was not a single reason for this. Many small things came together over time. The trade routes changed. The goods that once passed through Meroë began to go by other roads. The wealth lessened. The desert widened. The rains grew fewer. The green pastures dried. The herds could not feed as before. The trees needed for the iron furnaces also ran out, because for centuries those trees had been cut and burned in the furnaces. The fires that once made the kingdom grow had in the end wearied the land. This decline did not happen all at once. People did not wake one morning to find everything ended. First a few fewer traders came, then some furnaces burned less often, then some fields no longer gave as much. Some families thought of going elsewhere. In some temples the voices grew fewer. Sometimes a kingdom falls silent, not through a great war, but by slowly diminishing. Then from the east a new power rose. Aksum, a young, strong, and ambitious kingdom. In time the power of Meroë began to fade in its shadow. A day came when the kings no longer wore the crown. The palaces emptied. The fire of the furnaces went out. The sound of the hammers ceased. The prayers in the temples fell silent. The city slowly grew quiet. And the desert did what it has always done. It advanced with patience. It was in no hurry. The sand filled the streets. The wind wore away the columns. As the years passed, those steep pyramids grew a little more alone. People migrated to other places, to other lives. As they went, they carried their stories with them. Then those stories also faded. There was no one left to tell them, no one left to listen. The names were forgotten. Pir, Taharka, Amanirenas. Those names that once made an entire kingdom tremble blended into the silence. The kings who marched north. The queens who defied Rome. The masters of the iron furnaces. The priests of the temples. The traders in the marketplace. All of them drifted away in the wind. For centuries the pyramids stood alone in the desert. No one remained to tell their story. There was only the sand, only the wind, only the stars. But here there is something beautiful. To be forgotten is not to vanish, because the stone remembers, the earth remembers. The pyramids were there even beneath the sand, just like that buried bronze head, just like the golden jewelry of the queens. All of them waited in silence, the moment they would come out into the daylight again. And that day came. Travellers from distant lands reached this desert. They saw those strange steep pyramids rising from among the sands. They were astonished, because here, far from the known world, lay the traces of an entire civilization. People dug the earth. They brought the pyramids, the temples, the ashes of the iron furnaces, the pictures of the queens and the golden jewelry back into the daylight. The story returned piece by piece, stone by stone, name by name, like a memory drawn out of silence. Today those pyramids are one of the protected treasures of the world. People come from far away to see them. At sunrise they watch those long shadows falling upon the desert, and now they know. This is not an empty desert. This was once the heart of a great kingdom, and now you know it too. Tonight the story of Kush has been told once more, for you, in this silent room, in this soft darkness. The kings of the land of gold, the children of the sacred mountain, the steep pyramids of the desert, the orange light of the iron furnaces, the lion god, the silent writing, and the one-eyed, proud, fearless queen. All of them were once real. All of them lived, loved, fought, built. They woke in the mornings, they slept at night, just like you. Then they sank into silence. But tonight they lived a little longer, in your mind, and now they slowly pass into your dreams. Deepen your breath one last time. Draw it in and let it go. The river still flows. Below in the darkness, calm and endless. The stars still shine. Above, countless and silent. And you are safe here. Warm, sheltered, calm. Your body grows heavy. It sinks into the bed. Feel your arms relaxed. Feel your legs heavy and at ease. Your face has softened. Your breath is slow and deep. It comes and goes on its own. You do not need to do anything. You do not need to go anywhere. Just be here, in this warmth, in this silence. Tomorrow will be a new night, a new journey, a new forgotten story, and I will be here again. If tonight's journey has given you peace, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and to meet again in the next story. Because at Atlas of the Night, every night, another door of history that has fallen silent opens. And perhaps tomorrow night, together again, we will slowly make our way into another forgotten world. But now it is time to rest. Close your eyes. Let your shoulders drop. Let yourself go. Good night.